Okay, so welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the equipment that we recommend for side mount diving. And so the only way that we could do this properly is to invite two of my good mates and really good side mount divers. Dave, who you probably recognize from the previous talk about recreational diving, and in my opinion, New Zealand's best side mount diver and also side mount instructor, Steve Davis. So we'd like to welcome you, Steve.
Thanks very much. And with that sort of introduction, what can you say?
So for those of you who don't know Steve looks after sidemountpros.com, the website, and also Speaking Side Mount podcast, which is internationally recognized. Now, I've got to be honest with you and say I actually took some training with Steve when I did some real basic stuff with side mount, and I decided I needed to do it with the best person. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you.
Okay, so today we're just going to be talking about kit. We could make this massively long talking about side mount, but the good thing is Steve's already done a much better job of that with his podcast. So today we're just going to be talking about equipment and really like the choices that we have. And so again, it's a staff pick. What we think is the very, very best equipment for side mount diving. It is slightly different from other types of diving, so there will be some variation, and then there'll be also some similarities. So how we want to go about this, chaps, is we're going to talk about the regulators that we choose, the brand, the style, the configuration, and then our perfect or favorite side mount harnesses, and then computers, and then we'll go into a bit more information of other products. So
I butt in and just add one thing on top, and that is when side mount diving probably differs from other types of diving a little bit, and one of the first things you really want to think about is the cylinders that you choose, and they're very driven by the environments that you're going to dive. And of course, in most places, the choice is between 12-litre steels or 80 cubic foot, 11-litre aluminium. And so in New Zealand, for New Zealand conditions, particularly if you're diving dry suit, 12-litre steel cylinder is probably where you would start with modular valves.
And so with the valves as well, it's often a temptation, I think, for people to try and do things on the cheap and just use two standard single tank valves. So I think it is important with the modular valves. The good news is the modular valves is basically part of a manifold system. So it is possible to switch and change between twins and side mount, and if you have to at a push, use them for single tank as well. So good quality serviceable valves, I think, are really important. So we're all agreed on that, aren't we?
Yeah. Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so what about regs? What are your thoughts? Again, we'll start with you, Steve, as our guest. What would you be
again, I still dive today the same rigs that I used when I started side mount diving over 7 years ago, and I just took the recommendation of my instructor, and we were kind of working off what Steve Martin was diving at the time. But coincidentally, if you like, or maybe not coincidentally, it's XTX50s again. Apex do a fantastic purpose-built side mount set up for those, where you can buy the complete kit with a short hose on the left and a long hose on the right. And what I've found with those, what's great about an XTX50 for side mount, firstly, it's a really high performance regulator. I dived with Ed Sorensen in Florida, one of the world's greatest, cave explorers, rescuers, whatever you want to say. And when Ed and I did gas sharing, and he came out of the water and he said, "Wow, you're diving a really high performance regulator there." So, I mean, he enjoyed going from whatever he was diving and getting some gas from me. So, number one, it's a high performance regulator. Number two, it has a really good number. I think it's got 5 MP ports or LP ports on it, which is important, and 2 HP ports. But one of the those ports is a 5th port, which means it comes out of the end of the regulator, which makes it really good for hose routing for both your dry suit inflator and your BCD inflator. And then the last thing, but still equally important, is it has a rotating turret. And what the rotating turret gives you is the ability to have really good hose routing. So when you're stowing the hoses, preparing your cylinders for going in the water or getting out, it's easier to stow them really neatly. And then when you're using the regulators themselves, then you can move the rotating turret and have the best possible hose length, so that you don't have hose loops and anything, or you don't have a mess basically. And being squared away and tidy is really important for side mount diving, I believe. And so the rotating turret, high performance regulator, 5th port, those are things that you really want to look for, and the XTX50 has all of those out of the box. So for me, it's a lay down. Yes, there are other great rigs. The Scuba Pro does a great set as well, but I dive XTX50s.
Yeah, when you see some of the pictures of these and video of these guys on Sidemount doing the extreme cave diving as well, the other aspect of that particular egg which really works is durability as well. Seeing those tight squeezes from Mount Gambier when we were over there, all three of us actually over there. Me and Dave were a bit more juniors, and Steve was diving with the big boys in the tank cave, and yeah, the tight squeezes and the amount of silt that can actually accidentally get dragged into the regs is pretty extreme. So they are very well sealed as well. I think is a thing. We just take it for granted, but they're bomb proof. So. Yeah. Right. So, Dave, anything to add over with?
Yeah, I think for me, the other perspective is I've had my first X-Tech actually. I bought them when I was still twin tank diving for my first twin setup. But I actually bought the Sidemount kit knowing that I wanted to give Sidemount a go within the next few years. So they were very easy to configure. I think I had to buy one more hose for my SPG, but otherwise, what you got on the box is all you need for twin setup. And then I also had all the stuff I needed when I did go and do my Sidemount training, all ready to go to switch to Sidemount. So that Apex Sidemount X-Tech 50 kit is a really excellent product that you can buy even as a twins diver, and you've got everything you need if you decide to give Sidemount a go.
Perfect. Awesome. So the next one's probably a little bit more, I'm guessing, a bit more personal and a bit more, dependent on areas, that kind of thing. But then this is going to be the Sidemount harness. So again, I'm happy to say that I'm not an absolute expert at this. My first system was one I was recommended for me. It was a nice lightweight recreational unit. When I went to do my course with Steve, it kind of stood back and was very, very polite and professional, but insisted I try another one. So. And funnily enough, as a shop, we've actually changed what we sell based on Steve's advice and also Dave's use as well. So these are the first two guys in New Zealand that I saw dive in the kit that I think we're going to be concluding with. So again, over to you, Steve. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, Sidemount harness and BCD. I think the first thing you have to think about is the environment you're diving in. You mentioned that. So if you're a cave explorer versus somebody who's diving open water or wreck diving, then you might choose a different harness based on that use. And also you have to think about freshwater or saltwater. It's no secret that I'm a big X-Deep fan. And again, 7 years ago when I first started out, the first harness that was recommended for me was X-Deep Classic. And I started diving there. It's very much a cave setup. You don't see it around so much anymore. And it's really been superseded somewhat by the XTX Stealth 2.0 tech and REC harness BCD arrangements. What's great about them, and again, if we think about New Zealand Sidemount divers, most of us are diving a lot of different environments. So we start out in open water, typically in New Zealand. We might do some wreck diving. There's a couple of sea caves, but it's not real cave diving here unless you want to go south. But if you then want to take that into cave diving, you've got a different environment again. And if you were to choose one harness, it will cover the entire gambit from recreational Sidemount open water to wreck diving to cave diving to technical diving, where you're carrying more than 2 cylinders and you're starting to get into 3 and 4 for stage and deco cylinders. Then the Stealth 2.0 tech is, in my opinion, the best in the market. It can handle, it's got enough lift for that, 19 kilos of lift. It's got all of the things that you need for cave diving in terms of the flat back and really low profile. But where the inflation is, where the buoyancy is to your sides and your lumbar spine, really means that it's a super nice BCD and harness for trimming out. And the classic, what makes a great Sidemount diver, or what's the epitome of a great Sidemount diver? It's someone who's balanced, trim, in trim, and stable. And this unit, the system enables that, and it's the foundation of building that. So I think it has everything you need. Are there other great ones around? Yes, there are. But for Kiwis in particular, where we're doing a lot of environments and we're boat diving and we're shore diving and we're cave and maybe wreck, then I think the X-Deep Stealth 2.0 tech is the choice. Yeah. So that's my choice.
Yeah. Okay. And Dave, what would your choice be?
Again, the X-Deep Tech 2.0 Stealth, it's the one I learned in when I did my training with Steve about 4 years ago. And yeah, I just find it a great harness. I mean, I haven't tried other side mount harnesses. I have seen them in use by other people. A lot of them seem, to have a lot of compromises that, some of them seem to be like a back mount harness that someone's tried to adapt to side mount, or the designer, had that sort of thing in mind, whereas the X-Steep is clearly a pure side mount harness and has been designed from scratch for that. I've used it in tech, and I've used it with up to 4 cylinders. It's just a very comfortable and easy harness to use.
Brilliant. So I guess I'm the least experienced of the three of us here for Sidemount, but what I do see from a business point of view, the company X-Steep just really seem to care. Like they're real divers. They make really good kit. They support the industry. They sponsor and back up big expeditions around the world. They just seem to focus on one area, and they do a really good job. So it really fits in with our shop's kind of principles. So when Steve introduced me to Peter and the team and the product, I could see straight away that it was a really good fit. So we thank you for that, Steve. So
you're welcome.
So the compliment earlier, that was your payment for it. Okay, and the other good thing is you can actually customize them as well. Instead of everyone going around with the same black BC, you can actually get engraving with your own name. And now they do quite a few choices of customization for colors. All right, so for the BCs, we're covered. The main bit of hardware now would be computers, and it may not be a surprise to many of you to know that we're going to go along the same lines as we do for recreational and tech. But again, the problem we had when we think about recreational for us was deciding between which of the two shearwater computers would go with. So over to you, Steve. You're a shearwater diver, an avid fan.
Yeah, again, I started 8 years ago with shearwater computers after my I won't name the other brand, but got run over tragically by a boat trailer and died in the northland here of New Zealand. So I had to go out and think about what I was going to dive. And one thing I've always done is look for recommendations from top divers around the world. So I happened to go to John Chatterton's website, the famous wreck diver. And John had a big thing on there in shearwater computers and was saying how good they were. So I thought, okay, I'll give that a go. So I got the Petrol 2 at that time, I think it was, and it was just an outrageously good computer right from the beginning. I had a fault on it, and which was they had a problem with the battery terminals way back, and so this was probably 2013 or 14 or something. And I was on my way to Fiji, and I stupidly didn't check it before I went, and then I contacted Shearwater and said, "Hey, I'm going to Fiji in 2 days." And my computer just died, and they said, "Whoa, can you send it to us?" And I said, "Okay." So I sent it to them, and they turned it around in 24 hours and had the computer back to me. And with the side story that they would have given me one of their own computers had that one not been repaired. So not only do I love them from the point of view of it's by far the best recreational, I think, and technical dive computers out there in terms of functions and features and form factor. Their service is outrageous. It's just that good. So what do I dive now? So I've still got that Petrol 2, and that is my primary computer for open circuit diving. However, I now have a Teric as well, which is air integrated, and I use on my regulators, I use transmitters on both sides without SPGs, and I have found that to be excellent. So I'm wearing a Petrol on one side and a Teric on the other, and that is my go-to. Now, I would swap the Petrol for a Perdix. Yep. So if I was buying now, obviously, I think the Petrol might not even be available now. So now you would do Perdix and Teric. If I had to choose one, it would be the Teric, because it just has I'm wearing it now. It's a great watch, great dive computer. And so everything I want to do diving is on here. And I will say too that I'm using a Nerd 2 for my Sidewinder, because Sidewinder, and I find that great as well. I don't think you'd go anywhere else.
So we'll go on to transmitters, if that's okay. So I think for a lot of the market, we were a little bit suspicious about transmitters for many, many years. And then just in the last few years, they've slowly become accepted by the technical community. And it's almost an overnight sensation. And it was interesting to see it happen in the rebreather market. The guys... So the early adopters like Pete Mesley and Becky Scott, they put them on their rebreathers, but side mount divers, they seem to be the ones that were like, oh, they'll never do it. And then I remember really fondly seeing you, Steve, try a couple, and all of a sudden you became an overnight ambassador for them all, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the thing with the transmitters is obviously there's this fear of failure, you know, this kind of, you know, I'm going to lose comms and oh my God, what happens if I lose comms? But I've never had an SPG fail, but they can fail for sure. You know, I've certainly had leaks and those sort of things happen. As a good side mount diver, or as a good any diver, I think in my mind, in the back of your mind, you should always know how much gas you've got. The other thing too is, provided you haven't broken your dive plan, like breach the gas rule, you should always know you've got enough gas to get back to the surface or out of the overhead. So the bottom line, if you have a failure, you call the dive and go home. Having said that, I haven't had that happen. So I'm really pleased with it. It's fantastic to have it in your eye line. I don't back it up with an SPG because that does put another failure point in. And in my opinion, in tech diving, you don't want failure points. You want to be reducing failure points. And so I don't think there's any value in having an SPG and a transmitter. Even a button gauge. I mean, you can't read the damn thing. So I just think you go for it, right? I'm a big convert, and I haven't taken those out of my regulators since I started. They've been in there now for a little bit over 14 months, I think, and loving it. So yeah, I don't see me going back.
Great. Dave, you're the same kind of opinion there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I haven't dived with my analog gauges on Sidemount for probably a year and a half.
So if I had to ask both of you, which would be the first one? Which would be your first computer if you could only get one? I'll start with you, Dave.
I would go to Terek first. The lack of bulk is actually a good thing as well. The Perdix is a little bulkier. So yeah, now if I was going up the progression and I was sort of getting the first computer, I'd go to Terek, and then I'd probably get a Perdix when I needed a backup computer.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So same question for you, Steve.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I can't argue with the logic there, and I think just the utility of having, you know, being able to wear it as a watch, how good it is as a dive computer. I think if it's going to be one, then it's going to be the Terek. I get a lot of comments on this too. People look at it and go, "Oh, that's kind of nice. That looks expensive," and I guess in a way it is, but when you've got the added value of wearing it as a watch all day as well as your dive computer, then it's a good investment in your diving, and I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, great. Oh, it's a unanimous decision there. So the final bit we'll just discuss will be any other items that really recommend. And in my mind, I was thinking there'd be some specific recommendations for bolt snaps, for stage kits. Do we buy off-the-shelf ones, or do you have real secrets for rigging your own kit up personally?
Yeah, I'll jump into the here's one I prepared earlier. One piece of XC product I'm really liking is the bolt snap. Okay, and there's a couple of little design features that I haven't come across on other bolt snaps. One is just the actual main ring there. There's just plenty of room to get your finger through. I've had some bolt snaps where my knuckle tends to get stuck. Whereas that's huge, and also the gate is a good large gate. So even if you're snapping it over something on my Sidemount, it's not such a thing. But I've got other places I snap to on my rebreather that it doesn't jam. So yeah, just a really easy to handle bolt.
Dave, just hold that up too, Dave. Just hold it up. So there's one more point: is the flat section. I'm pointing at it. So when you're operating the gate, your finger rests against that flat there, and most of them are curved there, which means that your finger can slip around. And so the reason that that's flat there is to give you a really positive connection to the bolt snap when you're operating the gate. So it makes it so much easier. To me, that's the number one innovation on that clip, is that flat section versus a curve, which makes the gate much easier to operate. I love the big hole there as well. So
yeah,
cool.
And then for bungee, do you have a go-to set that you make yourself, Steve?
Yeah, just a really high quality 6mm bungee for your loop bungees, and then you need some really good quality 4mm for things like your necklaces and so on. In terms of the cylinder connections, there's a lot of people use cam bands, and cam bands are fine. I've never used them. I was recommended not to way back in the beginning, so I've always just used sheathed clamps, Jubilee clips, if you like. and then you just connect the bolt snaps to them with some paracord, and that makes a really nice positive connection. They don't move, and it's less expensive in my opinion as well. If you have to take it on and off for travel, the cam band might be better in that instance, but it only takes a couple of minutes for the screwdriver to take it off and put it back on again. So I think, and certainly stage kits are not appropriate for side mounts. So it's a different setup than staging a cylinder. And they also have some really nice double enders, which have exactly the same flats on them. So those would be recommended as well.
Okay, so we'll probably look at a package including all this. It's everything that we've discussed is we have in stock. But sometimes people just don't know this stuff. Now, bit of a blatant plug now. If I was looking to get some like a little bit further information about side mount, of course, to go with proper training as well, would there be any resources available?
Well, thanks for asking, Andrew. So, yeah, as Andrew alluded earlier on, I'm the host of Speaking Side Mount, the podcast. We've got, in fact, I've just released episode 48 today, and I've recorded 50 episodes. So it's an amazing resource. I'm really proud of it. But what it is the very best side mount divers and cave explorers in the world are represented on there, talking about their diving, about side mount diving, cave diving, exploration, equipment setup, everything that you want to know about side mount is available through there. There's also my website, sidemountpros.com, where you'll find a lot of background information. And on top of that, there's a YouTube channel for Side Mount Pros, where there's a ton of video. And one thing I would say, thanks for the plug about instructing, and I'm proud of what I've achieved and what I've accomplished. But when you're looking for a side mount instructor, I'm not the only person around by any means. And if you are looking for an instructor, make sure that there's some representation on their website or their Facebook or YouTube of them in the water, that you can see the skill level that they're demonstrating. But also look out for their students. And I'm really proud. Dave's one of my students, and he just became a phenomenal side mount diver. But more than that, Dave then used that as the foundation to move his diving forward. So he went to Gozo and trained side mount trimix, and then went on to rebury the diving. And I was kind of just a stepping stone along the way for that. And in my opinion, your quality as an instructor is very much represented by your students. They're the end product. And so if your students become good divers and go on and gain additional training, I mean, Dave's trained well beyond what I can teach him now. So it's, that's a really positive thing, because I think, my philosophy to diving and instructing is about producing better divers and helping people improve their diving. And so, that's certainly my philosophy on side mount diving and diving in general. So hope that helps.
Fantastic. Certainly does. Okay. Well, thanks, gentlemen. And we'll wrap up now. And
cheers.
Yeah, thank you very much.